I've always believed that some people measure wealth in money, others in square footage. But for me, it was space. Space to breathe, space to watch the seasons change without a neighbor's kitchen, a window staring back at me, space to step outside at dawn and hear nothing but the wind brushing over the grass. Remember the first morning after I bought this place? I'd barely unpacked a thing, just a mattress on the floor, a coffee pot on the counter, and a folding chair in the living room. But I woke up early, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold enough that it stung my lungs, but it was the good kind of cold. The kind that wakes you up without you having to check your phone. The sun was just creeping up over the tree line, and everything had that golden, almost syrupy light that makes the dew sparkle like it's been sprinkled with glitter. I took slow steps down the porch, past the old rocking chair that came with the house, and wandered along the edge of the property. I followed the tree line, boots crunching on frost. One hand curled around the warm mug every few yards. I'd pass one of the old wooden stakes marking the boundary. They weren't much to look at, just weathered posts with faded red caps. But to me, they were something else entirely. They were proof that all of this, every inch of it, was mine. I stopped at the far edge, where the hill slopes down toward the creek. From there, I could see nearly the entire spread. The way the fields rolled out like a blanket, the patches of wildflowers that would come back in spring. The big oak in the center that looked like it had been standing there since the Civil War. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what I worked for. All the long hours, the double shifts, the missed weekends with friends. They'd all been leading here. The house itself wasn't much then. The siding needed painting, the gutters sagged in places, and the roof probably wouldn't survive more than a couple more winters. But it was mine. No mortgage hanging over me. No landlord. Just me, the land, and the slow rhythm of country mornings. Those first few months, my days had a kind of peaceful predictability. Mornings were coffee and quiet walks. Afternoons were for tinkering in the shed or splitting wood. Evenings were simple. A warm meal, maybe a book, sometimes just sitting on the porch watching the light fade over the fields. If you'd told me back then that anything or anyone could disrupt that peace, I probably would have laughed. Because out here, things didn't change fast. Not the view, not the pace, not the people. But looking back now, maybe that was naive. Because change did come. It didn't come loud or all at once. It came quietly, one hammer strike at a time, until the sound became impossible to ignore. But that morning, that memory still belongs to me. It's untouched. And maybe that's why I keep coming back to it in my head. Before the fence, before the noise, before the line between mine and his got blurred. It started small, a noise you can almost convince yourself you imagined at first. I thought it was just the wind carrying sounds from farther down the road. Out here, sound travels strangely. You can hear a dog barking a mile away clear as day, but not notice a deer snorting in the bushes 10 feet behind you. But then I heard it again. A quick, rhythmic thunk. Thunk that didn't belong to any bird or tractor or passing truck. Hammer strikes. It was mid-morning. It's a kind of day where the air smells like wet leaves and wood smoke from someone's chimney. I was stacking firewood on the side of the shed when I heard it. I set a log down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and listened. There it was again, a deliberate whack of wood meeting metal. I walked toward the sound, boots sinking into soft dirt as I crossed the yard. When I reached the far corner of my property, I saw it, a neat pile of fresh lumber stacked right up near the boundary line. It's close to be a coincidence. I couldn't see the whole picture yet, just a couple of guys in work boots, heads down, moving with the casual pace of people who, no, they're not on a timer. They didn't notice me at first. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. I leaned on one of the old stakes, trying not to stare too obviously, and watched as they unloaded another set of boards. The smell of cut pine hung in the air, sharp, fresh like a hardware store aisle. It's funny, in that moment, I didn't feel angry out yet. Mostly I was curious. People build things. That's what people do. And my neighbor, well, he wasn't exactly the mow-your-lawn-every-Saturday type. But we'd had a couple of friendly exchanges. I remember one in particular, a late summer barbecue at the community park. It's the kind where paper plates bend. Under the weight of too much food, someone's uncle plays bad guitar, covers in the background. We'd stood side by side at the grill, him flipping burgers, me sipping a beer. He'd asked how I liked living out here, and I told him it was the best decision I'd ever made. He nodded, smiled in that easy way people do when they're making small talk, and said something about neighbors looking out for each other. Nothing about that moment seemed important at the time. But now, in hindsight, it feels like the opening line of a story I didn't know I was in. I didn't say anything to the workers that day, just watched for a minute, then turned back toward house. But the sound followed me, the steady, slow hammering, the occasional murmur of voices. It wasn't loud enough to ruin the day, but it was enough to stick in my head, and once you notice something like that, you can't unnotice it. A week later, I walked that corner of the property again. Only this time, it wasn't just stacks of wood and the sound of hammers. Fence was up, not halfway up. Not a rough skeleton of posts waiting for rails, up finished. 6 feet inside my land for a second. Thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. Angles can play tricks on you, especially in the open. I stepped closer, my boots sinking into the damp ground, and tried to line it up in my head. But the further I walked, the worse it got. The fence wasn't just near my line, it was standing. Where my morning walks used to be, the exact path I'd taken so many times with coffee in hand, now fenced off like it had never belonged to me. I crouched near one of my old wooden stakes. It was half buried now, like it had been kicked at or covered over. I brushed the dirt away with my glove, revealing the red cap faded almost pink from years of sun. My fingers lingered on it. It was the same one I'd touched the first day I moved here. It hadn't moved. Which meant the fence had. That's when the disbelief set in. Not the kind you feel when something's impossible, but the kind where you know it's happening and your brain still won't file it under real, because who does that? Just decides the line between mine and theirs is a suggestion. I walked the whole length of it, tracing the path with my eyes. The boards were new, clean, and annoyingly straight, the kind of work that's meant to last. They creaked under the sun's heat, smelling of fresh-cut pine. When I got back to the house, I went straight to the old hall cabinet, the one where I keep everything important but never organized. After digging past stacks of unpaid utility flyers, a half-empty flashlight, and a warped photo album, I found it, the survey map. I remembered the day I got it, the ink smell, the sharp folds. In the paper. Now it was soft with age, the corners bent. But the lines were still there. I spread it on the kitchen table, pressing the creases flat with my palms. The black ink showed the boundary clear as daylight. No guesswork, no maybe. It's over. Here I matched it against the mental picture I'd just taken outside. And the truth hit me harder than I'd expected. 6 feet. 6 feet of my land. Gone. It wasn't just about the dirt. It was the principle. That fence might as well have been a billboard saying, "I can take what I want, and you'll live with it." The irritation bubbled under my skin, but I kept my hand still, smoothing the paper like it might calm me. I wasn't ready to yell. Not yet. Because sometimes the worst thing you can do in the moment is react. I caught him one evening just before sunset. The light had that warm, lazy quality that makes everything look softer, even things that shouldn't. He was out by the fence, admiring it like it was a piece of art, one hand on his hip, the other holding a cold beer, his weight shifting from one foot to the other. I walked over, slow enough to keep my voice level when I got there. "Hey," I started, friendly enough. "Got a minute?" He turned with that easy smile, the same one from the barbecue, and nodded. "Sure thing. What's up?" I gestured. "To the fence. It's nice work. Straight lines, clean boards." I paused just long enough for the compliment to hang there before adding, "Only thing is, it's about 6 feet onto my land." He tilted his head like he was processing a new piece of trivia, took a sip of his beer, glanced at the boards, then back at me. "Yeah, I thought this was where the line was." Guess I was off a bit. Off a bit. That was the first crack in my calm. I pulled in a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. I've got the original survey. The stakes are still in the ground. The line's clear. He shrugged, like I'd just told him it might rain tomorrow. Well, I mean, we're talking. A few feet here, right? Doesn't seem worth making a fuss over. The fence is already up. That last part, the fence is already up. Felt like more than a statement. It was a move in a game, like saying, it's done, so what are you really going to do? I held his gaze, letting the silence stretch. In the fading light, I noticed a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't wide, wasn't obvious, just enough to make me wonder if he'd been waiting for this conversation. Tell you what, he said, setting his beer on the top rail like it was his. If it means that much to you, we can talk about it later, no rush. Later, no rush. Meanwhile, 6 feet of my land sat fenced in like it had always been his. I gave a short nod. The kind you give when you're done talking, but not done thinking. All right, I said. We'll talk. As I walked back toward my house, I kept replaying the look on his face. That half smile I'd ignored before at the barbecue months ago, I'd taken it for friendliness. Now, in my mind, it looked like something else entirely. Not friendly, not innocent, just knowing. A week after our little chat, I started hearing things, not from him directly at least, not at first. From other people. It started at the HARDWARE store. I was picking up screws and sandpaper when I overheard my name in the next aisle. Yeah, he had to clean up that boundary mess. Can't believe they didn't mark it right the first time, a voice said. It's casual, as if they were talking about the weather. I froze, my hand on the shelf. I knew that voice. It was him, he was talking. Too old Mr. Baines, who owns half the hayfields out this way? The neighbor's tone was light, almost sympathetic, like he was doing me a favor by fixing something I apparently got wrong. I stood there, staring at the box of screws in. My hand grip tightening until the cardboard edges dug into my palm. I didn't say anything. Didn't march around the corner and set the record straight. It's not my style, but I listened. 6 feet over, he said. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but I figured I'd just straighten it out myself. Straighten it out. That was the phrase. Like I was the one who had made a mess. And he, out of the kindness of his heart, had stepped in to fix it. The next time I saw him in town, he gave me that same half smile. No mention of the fence, no hint of tension, oh, just a neighborly nod as if nothing had happened. And then slowly, the story spread. I'd hear little versions of it from the guy who runs the feed store. From one of the ladies at the diner, all with the same casual tone. Like it was common knowledge now. The boundary was wrong, he fixed it. End of story. It was a strange kind of attack, not loud, not confrontational, just quiet enough to make you question yourself. There were moments when I'd walk the property, see that straight smug line of wood and think, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I am making too much of this. But then I'd see the survey map, or the old stakes, and the irritation would come back like a spark hitting dry grass. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a rewrite, and the worst part. He was telling it with a grin, like he knew I wouldn't fight him in public. Not yet. Anyway, there's a point where anger burns itself out. It doesn't fade. It just hardens, becomes something colder. That's where I was the night I made the call. It was late, and the house was quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge. Outside, the wind was pushing leaves across the porch, scratching them against the boards like tiny fingernails. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, mug of coffee gone cold beside me. On the screen, a cursor blinked in the search. Bar, County Building and Zoning Department. I'd been here before, not the website, but this feeling. The moment where you stop trying to reason with someone and start planning how to remove them from your problem entirely. I scrolled through the site, clicking deeper into sections most people never bother to read. Permits, codes, enforcement. The dry bureaucratic stuff that no one cares about until they're on the wrong side of it. That's when I remembered I knew someone. An old friend from years back. Someone I used to help out when they were fixing up their own place. We'd swapped numbers, stayed loosely in touch, traded the occasional Merry Christmas text. Last I heard, they were working as a county property inspector. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over the contacts list. There was a brief moment of hesitation, not because I didn't want to do it, but because once I did, there'd be no turning back. This wasn't a conversation over a fence. This was putting the problem into the system. I scrolled until I saw their name, tapped it, and listened to the ring. It picked up on the second call. "Hey, stranger," they said, their voice warm but curious. "Long time," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Listen, I've got a situation, something I think you might want to take a look at." I laid it out simply. No emotion, no dramatic storytelling, just the facts. A new fence, 6 feet over. And more importantly, what I suspected, that the big shiny mansion he'd been so proud of might not have all its papers in order. There was a pause on the other end. Then a low whistle. "All right," they said. "Send me the address. I'll see what I can do." When the call ended, I sat there for a long minute, staring at the steamless mug of coffee. The wind outside had died down, and the house felt even. Quieter? It didn't feel like victory yet, but it did feel. It's inevitable. They showed up on a Tuesday morning, 2 White County trucks, the kind you see parked outside construction sites with the official seal stamped on the door. I was stacking. Would out by the shed when they rolled up? I didn't wave, didn't even look at them for more than a second. Just kept working, splitting logs and pretending not to notice the way they were unloading their clipboards, measuring tapes and bright orange survey flags. From the corner of my eye, I saw them walk the length of the fence, stopping at every few posts to jot something down. The tape measure hissed and snapped back with that familiar metallic whip, followed by more scribbles. Across the property line, my neighbor had stepped out onto his porch. He wasn't smiling this time. One hand was in his pocket, the other holding a coffee mug he wasn't drinking from. He watched them like a man trying to look casual while every nerve in his body was on alert. The air had that heavy, quiet feel you get before a storm. I could almost hear his thoughts from here. Why are they here? Who called them? What do they know? I kept my head down, pretending to fuss with the woodpile, but inside there was a sharp, cold satisfaction curling in my chest. The last time I'd spoken to my inspector friend, years ago, we'd been leaning over the hood of his truck, drinking gas station coffee. He'd told me about all the ways people try to skirt building codes. Little shortcuts here, skipped permits there. "Doesn't seem like a big deal until someone makes a call," he'd said. "Then the dominoes fall fast." I thought about that now as I heard the camera shutters clicking. One of the inspectors crouched low, snapping close-ups of the fence line, then the house beyond it. Another walked toward the big glass windows of his mansion. Jotting more notes, my neighbor called out something. I couldn't hear it clearly over the distance, but the inspector just nodded, kept writing, and moved on. It went on for almost an hour. Measurements, photos, quiet murmurs between them. Finally, they packed up their gear, climbed back into their trucks, and drove off without so much as a glance in my direction. I stood there a minute longer, letting the quiet settle back in. The only sound was the soft creak of the fence boards. In the sun and the distant slam of his front door, the first domino had tipped. The first letter came. 2 weeks later, plain white envelope, county seal in the top left corner. I spotted it in the mailbox as I was walking back from the shed. The cold air stung my face, but my hand was warm around the paper. I didn't open it right away, just let the weight of it sit in my palm. As I kept walking inside, the words were polite but sharp. Notice of property line encroachment. Failure to obtain necessary building permits. That was the beginning. Over the next month, the letters came steady, like clockwork. Some with bold red stamps across the top violation, others with full pages of legal text. All lines and subsections and citations from county code. I read each one at the kitchen table, pen in hand, making notes in the margins. It wasn't about needing to understand them. My inspector friend had already explained what they meant, but about savoring them, like keeping score. The mansion, as it turned out, wasn't just over my property line. It was sitting on a stack of problems. Unapproved structural changes, missing electrical permits, an incomplete septic inspection. Half of it wasn't even up to code. It was the kind of mess that doesn't get fixed with a weekend of DIY repairs. This was a tear-it-down-and-start-over mess. I kept my face neutral when I saw him in town. He'd nod, but the nod was tighter. Now his jaw set a little harder. If he was sleeping well at night, he was better at pretending than I was. One morning, I walked past the mailbox again and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside, order for removal of unpermitted structures. Set it on the table, ran my finger over the embossed county seal, and let the smallest smile creep onto my face. The paper smelled faintly of ink and copier toner, but to me, it smelled like payback from that point on. I didn't need to say a word to him. The county was speaking for me, and their voice was louder than mine could ever be. The morning they came for it, the air was cool and still. I stood on my back porch with a mug in hand, watching the heavy machines roll in like slow, patient animals. From here, I could see the same stretch of land where, months ago, the first fence post had gone. And 6 feet over the line, back then, the sound of hammers had carried through the air, which struck a quiet trespass. Now, the sound was different. Metal teeth biting into wood, glass shattering under controlled force, walls folding in on themselves like they'd been holding their breath too long. The demolition crew moved methodically, piece by piece. One day, it was a status symbol, a gleaming monument to mine. The next, it was rubble and dust. A pale cloud rose over the lot, drifting into the sky. And for a moment it looked almost beautiful, like smoke after a fire that had burned itself out. I didn't feel triumph. Exactly, more like balance. Kind of balance that comes when the scales tip back to where they should have been all along by the afternoon. There was nothing left but a rectangle of dirt. No mansion, no fence. No trace of the smirk he'd worn that evening we first talked about property lines. Just open space again, and I let myself take a long, slow sip of coffee, the taste settling warm and steady. Weeks later, the new fence went in. Straight, neat, exactly where the survey stakes said it should be, no more. No less, the workers moved quickly, their boots crunching on my side of the property just long enough to set things right. When they left, the land felt lighter. Somehow, like a knot had finally been untied. I stood on the porch again, coffee in hand. Same spot where I'd first noticed those misplaced fence posts months ago. The morning light stretched across the grass. Catching on the fresh wood, it looked simple, ordinary, exactly as it should be. I thought about all the noise that had filled the space since then, the hammers, the gossip, the back and forth, and how, in the end, it had all gone quiet. Boundaries, I'd learned, don't just keep people out. Sometimes they keep the right things in dignity, patience, and the quiet satisfaction of letting the right phone call do the talking. I took another sip of coffee, a faint smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. The fence was back, the land was mine, and the peace was priceless.